Every house has a presence. Most of the time we call it comfort. Familiar sounds, familiar spaces, a sense of belonging. But in some houses, that presence feels distorted, as if something is occupying the space without ever revealing itself. These houses don't rely on sudden scares. They erode your sense of safety over time. Rooms feel colder. Certain areas are avoided without explanation. And eventually, the house stops feeling like shelter and starts feeling like a place you're being tolerated in. What follows is a story of a 4chan user about living in a house that was never truly empty. Hello X. Since this is the place for creepy shit, I thought I would share with you all the story of a house my family moved into at the beginning of 2000 and lived until 2006. It's going to be a mixture of stories from me and stories that my younger sister told to me, so bear with me. I'll be typing all this out, so I'll be slow. We first moved into the house at the end of January 2000. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with a full-size basement that sits off the road about 600 feet from the road. It's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and if anyone shows interest in it, I'll post the address if you want to visit it. It was supposed to be my parents, 3 sisters, me, and my mum's mother and dad. But for about 2 weeks, it was just my parents, sisters, and I. One of the first things we noticed about the place was that the basement door was just 2 loose pieces of plywood chained together, and that the basement had a chalk outline of a person on the wall. The house also had 2 chicken houses in a fence about 50 foot away in the backyard, on the side with the hill. The backyard was split into a field about half the size of a football field, with forest at the end, and the hill with the chicken houses on it, which was in the woods. The setup of the house was you walk in, the living room was right there. Take a right about 20 steps in, and there's a hallway, with the bathroom at the end, 2 bedrooms on the left, and 1 on the right. The kitchen was off the living room, with the stairs leading down to the basement, and the back door sharing the same walkway. The backyard had a set of stairs, so you could get up from the field, and a lower driveway that led to the basement. Then there was a block building on the right side of the house, with a small basement that was caved in. Sorry for the description, but it's necessary. I had the first bedroom on the left. My 3 sisters shared the second one, and my parents had the one on the right-hand side. The living room had a huge plate glass window that looked out on the front yard, and the driveway leading up into the woods to a house about 1/4 of a mile in the woods, with a farm where the Hells Angels would throw a party every now and then. There was also a creek that ran past the farm and our property. The first night we stayed there, we didn't have our cable or anything hooked up or stuff unpacked, so we were all kind of just trying to get used to things. I was 10 at the time, and my sisters were 9, 8, and 6. We were all fairly normal, though we were kind of abused by our father, me most of all. But besides that, we were a fairly normal family. For the first 3 nights, everything was normal. But the 4th night, our dad was gone to pick our mum up from work, and I was in the living room alone. My sisters were with my grandparents for the weekend, so I had free rein to watch whatever I wanted. I was sitting there flipping channels when I heard something hit the back door. I remember jumping and getting up to see what it was, and seeing an older white guy in a beat-up green beanie, a brown jacket, and a red shirt staring in at me. He wriggled the back door, trying to get in, and I took off for the phone and called 911. I couldn't remember what the address was, but the operator knew and told me she had a car coming out and to stay on the line with her. While I was talking to her, the guy had walked around the house and was standing in the front yard, staring in with a really bugged-eye look. Freaked my 10-year-old ass out. He stood there a good 5 minutes before he took off running. Then 30 seconds later, a sheriff came pulling down. They asked me if he was still around, so I told them about what happened, and one of them radioed it in while the other walked around looking. That was about the time my parents pulled in. The cops told them what was going on, and my parents took me inside while they looked around. My parents grilled me on what had happened, so I told them exactly what he had done. My father didn't believe me, so when the cops came back and said they hadn't seen anyone, he had no problem beating my ass. The guy actually ended up being a big part of the weird stuff that happened. He would peek in through the windows at night at my sister's, try and get in the back door or front door if he knew you were alone, would try and scare you by throwing shit against the walls. My sisters and I were the only ones to see him, until my grandma did one night when she was alone. Said he tried to get in, and told her stuff he was going to do to her. Every time we'd call the cops, they would never find him, and the times we tried to go outside and get him, he'd always get away somehow. We ended up becoming really good friends with the people that lived up the road. It was a family with 3 sons and 2 grandsons that lived with them. Whenever we would hang out, they would tell us weird stories about shit that happened around there. Hell, the first thing the grandpa told us was to stay out of the woods at night and to get out of them before it got dark because the wood elves would get you. We never believed him until my little sister and I were walking back home one night. No moon, and there are no lights on the road. We start hearing twigs break and whispering, then start seeing little lights moving through the woods. We take off running for home, and they follow us until we cross the creek. Then it stops. We never walked the road again at night, unless there was a lot of us and we had a lot of flashlights and knives. Back to the house. The basement was the creepiest part of it. The stairs had no rails, there were only 2 lights, and someone had put a shelf on the right of the stairs and killed all light from hitting the corner where the breaker was. Literally everyone who went in there got a bad feeling. The activity that happened down there would be low muttering, footsteps on the concrete floor. Lights would blow, and if you were down there in the dark, stuff would brush against you. About 2 months in the reality, people finally put a real garage door on the basement, but it would still flood if it rained hard enough. Whenever it would do that, you could sometimes see something move through the water. And the one time our father saw it, he blamed water dripping from the ceiling. There's also a story my sister told me about the basement. One day she was home alone. It was about the last year we lived there, when she got the urge to go into the basement. She said once she was down there, the wall opened up and something stuck its head out, looked at her, grinned, then started crawling out. She took off running upstairs and waited outside until our parents got home, then had me go down once I got home to see if it was down there. I didn't see anything, but it did feel weirder down there. There's a story from where me, the oldest sister, and one of her friends were hanging out in the basement. Her friend started shit-talking whatever it was down there. Then both lights blew and something laughed. We beelined it upstairs and stayed, and her friend went on to actually develop a really bad case of schizophrenia and shot herself about 4 years after it. Probably not connected, but still weird. There was a van that came down the driveway one day when my younger sis and I were messing around outside. I'd say I was 13 and she was 9 or 10. We were walking up the road when we heard a girl scream from the direction the van went. We took off running and hid in the woods to see what was going on. Saw the van rocking. The girl screamed again. I told my sis to run home and call the cops. So she did. I sat there for a little longer when the back door opened on the van and the guy looked out and around, then got out and walked to the driver door. Guy got in and left. I took off through the woods back home. Sis had called the cops, but they didn't get there in time to stop him. We're pretty sure someone got and we were too scared to stop it. I hope that's not the case. There was one year when it iced really bad and knocked the power out, where we heard what sounded like a baby crying in the woods, and we would wake up to claw marks on the screen door. Another time something killed 2 of our dogs, chewed them up really bad, and they weren't small dogs. On the flip side of that, we had an immortal rooster. Wild dogs would get him and rip him up pretty bad. Then he'd show up a few days later, perfectly fine. One of our dogs actually got a hold of him and bit his head almost completely off. We tossed him in the woods in front of our house, and 3 days later, he's back and pissed off. My sister also got adopted by the weirdest kitten I've ever seen. It walked right out of the woods up to her, sat down and looked at her, as if saying to pick her up. Damn thing was the colour of fire, with jet black tips on its fur, and the clearest blue eyes. Thing got really big, then just disappeared. But now that it's out of the way, I can get to the messed up stuff. There was some sort of demon in the main house that messed up my family up. We went from somewhat normal to me, a messed up 28-year-old that has night terrors and needs therapy. Oldest sis, which turned out the most normal, but was still screwing a 30-year-old at 16. Second oldest, who can't hold a job or a relationship, has 2 kids and the father's a shit then. My youngest sis, batshit crazy, PTSD, schizo, multiple personality. My mum passed away in 2011. My father is a cokehead. Now to, in his own words, keep me faster than the demons. This thing looked weird. Had a steer skull with blood that pulled out the eye holes, wore a black suit, and would appear at all times of the day. Whenever he showed up, something bad always happened. Once he showed up, and 30 minutes later 3 guys jumped my father and almost killed him. He ended up getting a steel plate put in the back of his head because of it. Another time he showed up, and not even 5 minutes later, we got the call that our grandma had been killed. My sis told me that he showed up before she got killed, and the one story I'm able to get out of the oldest is that he showed up the night she was in a horrible car wreck that wrecked her from having kids. He showed up to me one night when I was working third. Then I ended up getting robbed and beaten pretty badly. The one time it ever actually touched one of us, it was my youngest sister, and it left a mark. That's around the time she really started having mental issues. When it first started showing up is when our father started doing cocaine and other shit again. He'd done it in his younger years, but had stopped when I was born. He'd come home, steal money, beat my mum and us, then go off for days at a time. Whenever he was gone, it never really showed up, but when it did, we knew he was about to come home. It seemed like the more he did it, and the more he hurt us, the clearer we would see it, and the more often. Our mum would see it, but she would pretend not to and ignore us if we asked her about it. The last 2 years we were there were the most active times it would show up. And the last time we saw it was the day we moved out. The moving truck stalled and we barely got it going again. Someone almost hit us. I figured it was just from our imagination. But I ended up moving back into the place for a few months in 2010. I lived there about 4 months before I said screw it and the lease and moved out. The guy was still there. Me and a few friends actually ran out and tried to catch him with guns, but nothing. There were now loud banging in the basement every night. I stopped going down there when I did the first few times, to see nothing but for it to start back up once I was upstairs. I came home one day to see someone standing in the living room, looking out my curtains, but no one was in the house. The night I woke up to my car alarm going off and finding bloody handprints on it was when I said screw it and moved out. Now, as far as I know, no one lives there, and the place is in pretty bad shape. Something else that happened took place during a snowstorm that came up about 2 years into us living there. Our car couldn't get up the driveway, so my parents would have me bundle up and walk to the gas station about half a mile up the road. They had me go out one night because we needed kerosene to keep our heaters going and toilet paper for obvious reasons. It was around 9:30 at night, so it was dark, but I started off up the road. When I got about halfway past where the crazy old guy, let's call him Dallas, lived, and he walked out and called over to me to be careful because there had, apparently, been an accident up the road. I didn't pay any mind to it until I saw the car off in a ditch and a dead deer laying not too far from where the road was. It was apparent that the car had hit the deer and then skidded off the road. But by then, someone had already gotten whomever was in the car. I got to the gas station, filled up the kerosene jug, and grabbed a few packs of TP, then headed home. When I got down to where the car was, the deer was missing, with a trail that looked like something had dragged it through the snow. I freaked a little and sped my pace up, made it home and thought nothing of it. Later that night though, I'd say it was about 2 a.m, we woke up to something loud hitting the left side of the house nearest the living room. Our father walked out to see if maybe a tree had fallen and hit the side of the house. But apparently, someone had decided to throw a severed deer head against the wall. It weirded us out, of course, and my parents called the police, who took forever to get out there. They, of course, didn't find anything and told us to be on guard. Every winter after that, something similar would happen, but not always a deer. Sometimes it would be a dead opossum or raccoon or a rabbit. Opie did confirm that this was the house of the story. The lone house sitting in the middle of nowhere. And here's a picture of the basement posted by someone else in the thread, which OP confirms to be the basement of the house. We lived in a house for a couple of years when I was really young that had some weird shit going on in it. It was in the city, and it had the standard spacing between houses on either side, and I was probably 2 years old. My oldest brother is really in tune with spiritual stuff, and he felt evil energies flooding into the house when a friend of his started playing some kind of music. Pretty sure it was some kind of metal, because he was into a lot of that stuff. And nobody in our family particularly believes in metal being evil, but some of it's pretty dark. Another time, he felt something strange and looked out a window where some kind of pig-faced figure was staring in at him. Obviously, nothing was found relating to that outside him seeing it. There was also weird porn and stuff seemingly hidden about the house, and my brothers would sometimes stumble upon it, but they weren't ever looking for it. It was always more of a subtle thought to look in some strange spot that normally nobody would ever pay attention to. I think there might be something else about that house that was off, but I do know that the neighbours we had all said everyone that lived there had some kind of problem while they were there. This isn't one of mine, but I got the older sister to tell me something during a call this morning. She said she was around 13 years old and home alone for some reason. She went to the bathroom, which had a really small window in it right by the toilet, and she heard something rustling around outside. She thought nothing of it until she got out and walked into the living room. Someone had thrown something liquid on the big bay window and written, "I'll be watching you," in it. Then something slammed into the back door hard enough to knock one of the glass panes out of it. She called the cops, and while talking, someone tried sticking a hand in the window, but the dog we had at the time ran up and latched onto it. Person screamed and jerked their hand back, but she said it wasn't a normal scream, then took off. Cops got there, took samples and pics of the bay window, then looked to see if the dog had bitten hard enough to draw blood, which he hadn't. They did find a glove with hairs in it though. That's all she'd tell me though, sorry. Also, my younger sister and I talked earlier tonight, and she brought up the creepy stuff that would happen after midnight if we were still outside. I remember one instance clearly, and I'll share it. For background, our bonfires were usually after us holding a get-together of friends and family and eating homemade chicken stew, and the adults getting drunk and going inside while leaving us kids outside to deck around in the fire. We would hold them in the backyard in the field, until one year our father switched them to the front yard. In his words, to keep a better eye on you kids after we come inside. My father didn't give two shits about us, so that caught me off guard at the time, but I never put two and two together. This particular instance happened in late November of 2004 as a late birthday party for me. As such, my best friend at the time was over, two more of my friends, the oldest sister had a friend over, and my other two sisters were the only kids there. It was after 12 and we were doing regular kid stuff when left alone with fire, setting the ends of branches on fire and twirling them around, making the fire bigger, telling stories and all that. Of course, my sisters and I told them about the wood elves and how something creepy lived in the woods, but they didn't believe us. It was about that time we started hearing branches in the trees rustle, like a squirrel was jumping from them. But there were a lot of them and moving fast. One of my friends had a flashlight with him, and he turned it on and shined it into the trees. There were dozens of little eyes reflecting back from the shadows, and he quickly turned it off. We all kind of looked at each other. Then a large branch flew out of the woods and landed not far from where my sisters were sitting. They screamed and took off, and we were quick to follow. We all ran back into the house, and the adults asked us what was wrong, and we quickly told them what we had saw. They, of course, didn't believe us, so we insisted that they go outside and look for themselves. 3 of them, younger guys our mum worked with, went outside with a flashlight for each of them, and they scanned the woods for a good 5 minutes before coming back to report they hadn't seen a thing. The adults got mad, sent us to our rooms, and that was the end of that. Also, I have about an hour and a half before I got a crash, so I can share a few stories the neighbours told us. For reference, up until about 2005 to 6, they had a mini scrapyard of vehicles on the land on side of the house, the right side, and then a large 2-story garage with an apartment over it on the left side, with a driveway going around the house and hooking up with the main driveway out of the woods. Behind the house is a large hill that slopes down to some land an old Hells Angel owns. It's pretty much a bare strip of land, a little longer than a football field and about as wide, with nothing but trees around it and a dingy little runoff pond with an old zip line over it. They also always, owned a lot of dogs, at the very least 6 of them. They told us it helped keep away the wood elves, to keep them from throwing shit through the windows or messing the people that lived over the garage. Also, their dogs had a high turnover rate, as in one would go missing at least every 2 to 3 months, unless it was winter, where they would lose at least 4 before it ended. They always had the same breeds as well, Rottweiler and Chow Chow. Anyway, one of the first stories they told us was about how one night, after they had first moved in, they'd lived there a good 12 years before we moved in, 2 of their sons had been chased out of the woods by the wood elves, and the elves had started throwing rocks and branches through the windows. Apparently they had saw one and decided to throw a thick branch at it. They said it had hit it and it fell over and started shrieking like a cat that had its tail stepped on. And suddenly there were dozens of them in the trees and bushes. They took off running and they took chase after them. I don't know if it's true, but it sounds like something they would do. I should make something clear. The neighbours had their grandma and grandpa, their 2 sons, and one of the sons' 2 sons and his wife living there. It was a fairly decent sized house with 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 down, and of course, the one above the garage. One of the uncles was paralysed from the waist down and was the one who lived in the basement room, with his brother and wife in the room off of the living room, the 2 sons in the middle bedroom across from the bathroom, and the 2 grandparents in the room off the kitchen. This is all important later. The house had a lot of windows, 20 in the first floor alone, and a lot of them were at least 10 foot off the ground. The only rooms to have windows you could reach from the house was the living room, bathroom, the kitchen, and of course the basement room. I became really good friends with the paralysed uncle, let's call him Bill, because he was big into video games and shit. One night when I was hanging out with him, he asked me if I wanted to hear about one of his creepy experiences. And I, of course, said, sure. I remember this part very clearly because up until that point, I had never really saw a gun up close. He pulled a pump-action shotgun from beside his bed, then pulled a pistol from underneath his pillow. Said he hadn't had them for long, maybe a year. Then he started talking about how one night everyone but him was gone. It was about 11:30 at night, and he was playing something on APS-1 when he heard the outside basement door open up. He thought it was someone from his family coming home, so he ignored it. But then his doorknob started jiggling. He picked up the closet thing he had, which was a 25-pound weight, and got ready just in case. He said about a minute passed before it stopped and his door started slowly opening. He said something that looked like pick-related walked in and stopped, looking right at him. He said that it had looked confused to see someone in the room. And he said that for some reason, the way its eyes were freaked him out, so he screamed and threw the weight at it. It shrieked and took off out of the room and out of the still open outside door. And he grabbed another weight in case it came back. He had to sit there for about an hour afterwards, waiting for someone to come home. Said the whole time he could see stuff dart around in the shadows outside. Said when he heard tires on the gravel, he started yelling as loud as he could until his brother and father ran downstairs and saw the open doors. He told them what happened. Said he wanted some guns, and his dad literally went out the next day and bought him the shotgun and pistol. He said it never happened again, though stuff would scratch at the window above his bed. The son's first story they told my sisters and I was about their first dog that went missing. Their parents insisted on getting a dog for the two boys, so they both agreed on a black Chow Chow male from the pound named Lucius, the name he answered to. This dog loved them both to death, was pretty much their shadow whenever they would go off to play in the woods around the house. Lucius would sometimes take off after something into the bushes every now and then, but would never leave the boys' sight and would always come when they called him. They were out playing one time, a little later than normal, because they'd gotten a little Daisy BB gun and were shooting old cans, when they noticed that the sun had started setting. They took off for home since they were a good ways away and didn't want to get into trouble, when Lucius took off after something in the brush. This time when they called him, he didn't come back, so they figured he'd come home later and decided to run without him to keep from getting in trouble. They said they were about 50 yards from the house when they heard Lucius bark, then yelp from behind them. At that point, they were close enough for their dad to see them because he was waiting, and he came running into the woods to see what was going on because he'd heard it as well. He told them to head home and he'd get a few friends to look for the dog, which he did, but they didn't stay out in the woods for too long after dark. So he told them he'd try again the next day. He was saved from that though when the next morning they woke up and the dog's collar was sitting square in the middle of their welcome mat on the front porch. Their dad told them to forget about the dog, that someone had found the collar, and them putting it on their porch like that meant that he was missing. They didn't argue with him, and they were too young to really understand at the time. I just remembered a good one for you guys. I'll tell you about the summer of 2002. That summer, all kinds of creepy shit happened. But it all came to a head one night. Some idiot had wrecked his car into one of the utilities pole and knocked all power out for our area. Since it was summer and hot as hell, we had to open the windows for it to be remotely comfortable indoors. Both us and our neighbours had done this before we tried to get some rest. And this was about 12 a.m. because we'd waited up to see if power would be restored that night. About 12:15, and this is what they told us. Our neighbours had started hearing one of the boys outside calling up to be let in. It was coming from under the window in the boys' room, so it took a little for it to wake their father or grandparents up. It did wake the two boys up though, who it thoroughly freaked out. When it did wake their dad up, he got pissed, thinking of course one of his sons was outside, trying to get their brother to let them in. So he opens his room door, pissed off and stomping toward the door that led into the basement. He stopped when he saw his two sons stick their head out and shake it, then whispering that it wasn't them, and luckily the voice called out about then as well to prove it. By this time everyone in the house is awake and listening to it, and this goes on for about 10 minutes before it starts circling the house. The dogs are going crazy. Bill is in the basement calling out, wondering what the hell is going on. And it's just general confusion. Their dad decides to call down to our house with their cell phone. Our mum had a cell phone for work and asked us if we would come get the boys because something was going on. My mum, being the kind lady she was, decides to wake our father up and have him drive her up the road so they can pick up the boys. He's of course pissed off that he got woken up, so he wakes me up really roughly to keep an eye out while they're gone. They get dressed, head out, and head up the driveway in our old police Interceptor Crown Victoria. Our mum had picked it up at a charity auction about 5 years before. I loved that car. I know the ride up takes a bit, especially at night, because the road is really just a dirt road with some spots of light gravel and the rest being large dips and washed out parts. So I'm sitting in the living room with a few candles lit and trying to read to pass the time. At that point, I'm the only one awake in my house, with my sisters being asleep in the back room on the far left side of the house. If you've ever been in the middle of the woods when the power goes out and there's a new moon, you know how dark it gets. I was sitting in the recliner across from the bay window, so I could see the headlights when they were coming in. So that kind of darkness is what I was staring out at. I remember sitting there for a good 15 minutes waiting for them to get back, when I heard the bushes on the hill closest to the house move. I didn't think anything about it because we got possum and raccoon around there a lot. But I got weirded out when it stopped underneath the air conditioner in the living room. It was a good minute of silence before something smacked the air conditioner grate, hard enough to shake it, which made me jump out the chair and grip a little dinky softball bat. The sound had woke my sisters up, and they funneled into the living room asking what had happened. About that time, whatever it was smacked it again, causing the three of them to shriek. I, being the oldest, felt like it was my responsibility to keep my sisters safe. So I remember telling them to stay in the middle of the room, that I was going to check it out. I grabbed one of the spotlights we owned, walked to the front door, said a quick prayer, then stepped outside and flicked on the light to look around. I took my time in looking in the front yard, not wanting anything hiding to jump me. I'm not going to lie, I was really scared walking over to the side. Like that balls are so shriveled, it's painful fear. I remember peeking around the side slowly and seeing one of the little bastards running off towards a chicken coop that we were actually using to keep chickens at the time. I pretty much mentally said, screw that, I ran back inside. And about then, we spotted a car's headlights coming around the bend from the neighbours. We all stood in the living room and watched as they pulled in, our father getting out first and holding a shotgun the neighbours had let him borrow. Next was our mum, who opened the back car doors for the neighbours' sons to get out of. I walked to the front door and held it open, the spotlight acting as a kind of beacon, and they all four ran inside, our father telling me to lock and deadbolt the door, and for us to stay away from the windows. My mum told me to follow her to her bedroom while our father stayed in the living room, and she told me to let our two dogs out of their kennels while she got her pistol. She'd gotten her permit and CCW a few years earlier. She was a waitress, and one of her regulars became a really creepy stalker, so she'd gotten it for those late nights she worked. She never let us see it, so her doing that made it click in my head that something was really wrong. I let our two dogs out, a blue Merle Great Dane and a Rottweiler Chow Chow mix, and they were both tense as hell. You could tell in the way their tails and eyes were. We kept hearing stuff move around in the woods outside for another hour before something hit the air conditioner again, except this time it didn't stop, just kept banging. Then something started in on the bathroom window. Then something started scratching at our front door. That kept on for about 2 hours before it started tapering off. About then, what sounded like a banshee wail came from the back of the house. We all nearly shit ourselves, and I know for a fact that the middle sister did piss herself. Our father grabs a flashlight and slowly walked into the back, checking each room. But he didn't see anything. About that time, the power popped back on, which caught us off guard, but we felt better now that we had lights. The neighbours called us and asked if we were okay, then asked if we'd heard the scream. They said a little before it had happened, one of their dogs had gotten out and taken off running into the woods, but then they heard it yelp in pain and go quiet. They told us the boys could stay down with us for the night, then hung up. I took them back to my room while my mum went to sleep and our father stayed up, and asked them what had happened at their place. They told me that something had started banging on the air conditioners. Then they had heard running on the front porch, and something had tried to open the bathroom window. Their grandpa had shot it, and whatever it was took off into the woods. They said Bill had been screaming about something trying to get into his window, and that he could hear something banging on the outside basement door. Their dogs had started whimpering and trying to hide, so that's when they called my parents to come get them. I also feel I should give you all a little more information about the rest of the property. As I stated before, there was a large farm plot that was owned by Hell's Angel. What I fail to say is that he also owned a lot more. The large football-esque field he owned, and also a patch of it with a few older buildings on it in the woods. While he didn't mind us going on to the farm property, as long as he was there with other people, he absolutely hated us going anywhere near the other places. Hated it to a point he started putting booby traps up to keep people out. He actually had someone that lived at the top of the hill with a decent view of the football field that he paid to call him if they saw anyone on it. Also, I should say that this Hell's Angel in particular was named Joe Smith, and he had apparently run the NC chapter for a long time. The only reason I'm telling you all this is if you want to do a little background info to see if I'm bullshitting. You'll see I'm not. One thing about his land, though, was that it didn't have defined borders, and the only creek that was on it ran through his lands and ours. So if you followed it, you were bound to end up on his property eventually. The only reason I bring up the creek is because my next story involves it. The creek ran from underneath the main road, then snaked its way through our land and Joe's. Whenever it was warm, I would walk it and look for rocks and crayfish. Plus, when I got a pellet rifle, I would hunt squirrels and rabbits as well. Once my younger sister got herself a pellet rifle, she started coming with me. One day when we were out, we were in one of the bigger bends in the creek, and there was a small beach complete with sand that we decided to stop on for a little break. In this point, I'm 16 and she's 11, and we routinely did this to get away from the house as much as possible, as long as we were out of the woods before dark. We were resting when my sister pointed out some tracks in the sand that stood out. I stood up and walked over to check them out, and that's when it hit me. They were baby tracks, like a little toddler wearing shoes, and appeared out of thin air, took 8 steps, then disappeared. There were no tracks leading up to it or away, so it kinda creeped us out, but we decided to keep going. A little farther up the creek, we started hearing what sounded like a baby crying, which sent me into alert mode because I was always told, if you're in the woods and you hear something like that, it's a cougar. I told my sister as much, and we started heading back. When he neared the beach from earlier, we saw more of the little tracks and decided that we should beeline it back home. The whole hike back, we kept hearing something move in the woods, and every now and then we'd hear the baby cry. But we didn't see anything and made it back home without incident. That same summer of 2002 is when I started getting left home alone a lot for my parents to take my sisters out for stuff. I didn't mind too much because I could stay home and play whatever I wanted and eat whatever I wanted. I remember this particular night my parents had taken my sisters out to a movie, then to a restaurant afterwards. So I was home alone a good 4 hours. The oldest of the 2 neighbours' sons was down with me. And we were playing something, I don't remember what, but we were in my room, which was in the middle of the house. The way I had my room set up, the bed was against a window. I had my TV set up at the foot of my bed, and my closet was always open because I had an air vent in it. We were sitting on the bed messing around when somehow my TV comes unplugged. We both wonder what the hell happened, and I go to plug it back in when he taps me on the back and points at the TV. In the reflection, you could see someone staring in through my window. I immediately flip my shit, grab the softball bat, and run out to the kitchen to make sure they aren't trying to get into the back door. Meanwhile, the neighbour, let's call him Brandon, picks up another bat and waits in my room for the all clear. While I run into the kitchen, I see someone run around the right side of the house towards my front door, and they start beating on it. I yell at Brandon to go call the cops, and I run to the door to make sure it's locked and deadbolted. He calls to me and says the line is dead. We're on our own. We're both freaked out. The person is still beating on the front door. We're trying to figure out what to do. So I decide, screw it, let's get some knives. We grab my father's big Bowie knife he kept sharp for hunting, some chef's knives from the kitchen. We barricade the front door and back door as much as possible. And then we sit in the living room, waiting. Whoever it is has stopped banging on the front door and has instead started walking around the house, hitting the sides of the walls at various points. Occasionally they would smack a window, but not too many times. This kept on for the entire time they were gone, not stopping until my family started pulling in the driveway. We unbarricaded the front door, and that caused us to get questions, so we told them what happened. My father grabbed a bat and walked outside to look around while my mum called the cops to come out. They did, took fingerprints from a few of the windows, stayed out there until the phone repairman came out and fixed our line, then kept a car up the road in case it happened again. This happened during the summer of 2005. I had a group of friends over to hang out with and play paintball with in our woods. Altogether there were 12 of us, and of my friends had brought his little 9-year-old brother with him because he had to babysit. The part of the woods we decided to use was not too far from my neighbour's house, and we were using an old tobacco barn and house as our bases, one on one side of the driveway and the other on the other side. We got started about 11 that morning and were planning on playing until about dusk, when we planned on heading back to my place to go our separate ways. We're all between 14 and 16 years old, have a pretty decent knowledge base when it comes to the woods, and we all have at least a pocket knife on us, so we aren't completely helpless. We keep playing for a few hours and stop close to 2 to take a lunch break. And that's when a few of my friends ask me if the woods are always that quiet. It getting quiet was usually a sign that the wood owls were out and about and keeping an eye on things. So I told them it happened a lot and not to worry about it, to keep from sounding crazy in front of my friends. We finished lunch, then headed back into the woods for some more firefights. Fast forward about an hour, and we're both holding still when we hear one of the guys start yelling and shooting off into the woods with his gun. Then the crashing of him running through the brush back towards us. My team gets ready to light him up when we notice there's blood coming from the back of his head. So we call for a timeout to check him out and see if he's all right. We get him sat down and start washing the blood off his head with a canteen one of our guys had. He starts talking about how he'd been in some brush, laying still, away from the rest of his team, when he'd heard movement behind him. He didn't think anything of it, thinking that it was some of his team moving up. He said it was about 30 seconds after it stopped that something hit him in the head, hard enough to knock him out for a bit. But he'd woken up to something dragging him through the woods. He said he raised his head and saw little stick bastards with vines wrapped around his ankles pulling him. And that's when he started screaming and shooting. The rest of the guys laughed it off and said he must have hallucinated from hitting his head. But he insisted that he knew what he saw. I, of course, knew immediately what he was talking about, but still said nothing, so I didn't seem weird. I did suggest that we head back early though, just so we could get a better look at his head and make sure he was actually all right. We start heading down the driveway, him between 2 of us to keep an eye on him, and he's constantly looking back and around at the woods with eyes as wide as a plate. Get about halfway down when he starts screaming and takes off running for my house. A few of the guys going after him, but not able to catch him. I look back while the rest of the guys are talking among themselves, and I see movement in the trees and bushes, and I know then why he took off running. We get to my place. He's sitting on the porch with a phone in hand, telling his mum to come pick him up. The guys that chased him looking worried because they'd never seen him act like that before. Long story short, the wood elves tried to knock one of my friends out and drag him off to do who knows what to him. He ended up moving a few months later, was never really the same while he was still around. Refused to go near the woods, sold all his hunting gear, and would flip shit whenever someone brought that day up. For reference, this is the entrance to the wood of the forest. OP is talking about. This happened about a week after my birthday in November, and I was 17. It had already started hitting the 20s at night, and the majority of the trees were bare, besides the pines. I was sitting in my room, messing around trying to fix a PS2. A friend of mine had brought me to see if I could get it up and running again. When my father walked into my room and stood there for a bit, watching me, he started talking about how I didn't know what the hell I was doing and that I should give up. And since I was in my head working, I said the first thing that came to mind, which happened to be to tell him to go choke on a dick. He stepped over and grabbed me by the shoulder and asked what the hell I had said. So I repeated it, because I figured I might as well dig my hole deeper. He took a swing on me, missed, and I took that chance to hit him as hard as I could in the jaw, which ended up with him falling through a table I had and laying there. My brain then realized what I had done, and I panicked, grabbed an old army field jacket I always wore into the woods and made a beeline for the front door, then took off into the woods. I made it about halfway up the driveway before I realized that he'd know that I had ran from my neighbors. So I decided instead to dip into the woods and go to ground in one of the old wood barns scattered throughout the woods. The one I chose had a little door on the backside, where I guessed whomever had used it had put extra wood for easy access, and the main door, which was made out of wooden slats. Both doors were relatively intact, so I closed up both and sat in a corner to wait out my father. I sat there for a good bit of time and started noticing it getting darker out. It getting dark out started sending off warning bells in my head to just sprint out of the woods and take whatever ass-kicking I was going to get from him. But by that age, I was too stubborn to listen to anything, so I kept sitting there. By the time the sun went completely down, I had been in the barn for almost 4 hours and was starting to really get cold. Shorts and the field jacket aren't exactly great cold weather gear. I started looking through the jacket pockets and luckily found a book of matches I usually kept on me if I was going to be in the woods for any amount of time. But I hesitated to try and start a fire, thinking if I did, someone would see it and come looking. The wood elves weren't even on my mind at this point either, since I was inside a structure with doors. But as the night wore on, my brain started thinking on them. That was when I noticed that things were starting to quiet down in the woods around me. Being in the middle of the woods at night, in a building, means you're sitting in pretty much total darkness, which I will admit freaked me out a bit. But then something happened that made me almost shit myself. I started hearing stuff move through the tree branches towards my hiding spot, then stop a good 10 feet from the barn. I sat there straining my ears to hear anything, when something jumped on the roof of the barn. It sounded like something light, almost like a squirrel. It was followed by 3 more, then silence. At this point, I decided to say, screw it, I'm getting a fire going, and start trying to gather what materials I could use in the barn by matchlight. I managed to grab an armful of old leaves, some pieces of old wood, and managed to get a small fire going in what looked like an old stone fire pit in the center of the barn. The fire wasn't too big, but it did illuminate the rest of the barn well enough that I could see if I was alone. Luckily I was, and the fire gave me a sense of security as well as helped warm me up. So I sat close to it, my back against one of the walls. That was when I started hearing something digging at the roof. If you've ever seen a hamster or similar rodent digging, think of that, just a lot louder and about as fast. I looked up towards the sound, and that's when I heard the noise at the small door on the back of the barn. At this point, I am more than scared and feel trapped, so I admit that I start freaking out a little. I'm pacing the barn and looking for anything I can use as a weapon, when I remember that if it's a wood elves, they're made of wood, and I have a fire going. So I form a plan. I start looking for a few sticks big enough to act as a torch. Find 2 that'll suit my needs, then set about making torches. I take off my jacket, then remove the shirt I was wearing, then start tearing it into strips and wrapping them around the branches, then get both torches going. I figured more fire would make them leave me the damn alone. At this point, it's been close to an hour since I started the fire though, and it's starting to die. So I decide to man up and take one of the torches and set just outside the front door to see if I can gather a bit more wood and fuel for it, because I am not staying in the barn without a fire going. I stick the torch in a hole in the wall to act like a porch light. Then as fast as I can, I grab a couple big armfuls of leaves and toss them inside. Then grab as many loose branches as I can, toss them in, grab 2 huge ones laying nearby to act as barricades for the doors. Then grab the torch and head inside to set about work. I should make it clear that at this point it's about 8:30 by my estimate, and I'm wondering if I have enough fuel to keep the fire going all night. I decide to chance it and start barricading the doors as well as I can with the 2 large branches I brought in, and sit down to wait. Me sitting didn't last too long, as the scratching was getting worse on the roof and at the back door. So I took the torches and sat one on each end of the barn to act as a bit more light. The scratching at the back door stopped as soon as I put one near the door, and I heard scurrying from it, so I thought that maybe it had been a raccoon or a possum and not an elf. That's when the scratching on the roof got worse, and any thoughts of it being an animal left my mind. It started spreading out over the roof, like it was testing for a weak spot. And I sat there looking up and wondering if I was about to get attacked from the rafters. This went on about 30 minutes, then stopped abruptly, like it had never happened. I'm sitting there listening hard as hell, and that's when something hits the wall where I'm sitting. I jump up cussing and almost pissing myself and grab another branch from the pile, sticking the end of it in the fire and hoping it catches on so I have another torch of sorts to use as a weapon. That's when I see a reflection coming from one of the holes at the bottom of the wall. I leave the stick in the fire so it can catch on, then get on my belly to try and see what the reflection is coming from. But it moves before I finish, and I stop dead, knowing what I just saw. I'm starting to get pissed now because I'm cold, tired, and I really just want this bullshit to end. So I walk towards the front door, move the branch from in front of it, grab the torch, and step outside. I remember saying something about how if they wanted me, they weren't getting me without a fight. And standing there trying to look like a badass, whilst trying not to piss myself because what I'm doing is batshit stupid. I stand there about 3 minutes, then decide to step back inside. I turn around and something smacks me in the back between my shoulders, hard enough to almost make me fall. And I spin to see if I can catch a glimpse of whatever it was. I look at the ground, and there is a huge rock sitting there where there had been no rock earlier. So I say, screw this, and step back inside, barricade the door again, and put the torch back in the hole by the front door. That's when shit started hitting all the sides of the barn. The scratching on the roof got worse, and I won't lie, I pissed myself a little, because I was in the middle of the woods, alone, with little wooden bastards tormenting me. And this goes on until, I'd say, close to midnight. And that's when things got really quiet. I mean the kind of quiet where you could hear a pin drop. I'm sitting by the fire. I've got one of the biggest sticks close at hand in case I have to beat something with it. And I'm telling myself that it'll be fine. They're just messing with you like the little assholes they are. It works a little, and I start pacing just to have something to do, and so my legs wouldn't be cramped from sitting if I had to run. It's quiet like that for close to an hour. And then it starts up even worse, and there were a few times I swore I heard little voices coming from the cracks and holes in the walls. Every now and then I'd see something dart across the holes closest to the floor. But I tried to put it off as seeing things, then trying to rationalize that they wouldn't come in, as long as I had the fire going. That lasted all of about another 15 minutes when the fire started dying again. I reach over to grab some leaves to toss on, and I realize that the majority of the damn things are wet. So I switch my attention to the branches to see how they are. Sure enough, most of them are wet as well, but enough of them are dry that I toss them on the fire to build it up more, then move the leaves and branches closer to the fire to dry them out. That was when they started laughing. Their laugh sounded like what you would get if you rubbed a chalkboard with sandpaper, just magnified and all around me. I take it about 5 minutes before my brain yells at me to shut it up, and I grab a stick out of the fire and wait to see movement by one of the holes or cracks. I didn't have to wait long, and when I did see it, I jabbed the stick as hard as I could into whatever it was. The end was still glowing red, and when I felt it hit whatever it had made contact with, shrieked like it was in pain. Then the whole woods sounded off with the same shriek, just in varying pitches. That's when shit hit the fan. Something hit the back door hard enough to jar it loose somewhat, and something pushed the torch from its hole in the wall so that it fell out and hit the ground, rolling towards the center of the barn. I pick it up, figuring 2 weapons are better than 1. Then I hear something smacking against the front door. I run to the back door, kick it shut and put the branch in a better position to bar it, then toss the 1 stick in the fire while heading towards the front door. I kick it, make sure the branch holding it shut is still secure, then grab the second torch and head for the fire. I'm standing there, a torch to either side of me, looking from the front to the back, and just waiting for something to happen. And something did happen, just not what I expected. I started hearing my neighbors calling my name, and from the sound of it, my father, his best friend, and my uncle are with them as well. The assault on the bar stops, like they're listening to them as well. And then I started hearing dogs barking and getting closer. I started yelling for them, and that's when something hit the back door hard enough to knock it off the hinges and break the branch acting as a bar. I swing around and start cussing and do the only thing I could think of. I throw one of the torches through the doorway. I see movement scatter as it sails through the doorway, and I take that opportunity to run my ass out of there, heading in the direction I hear everyone shouting from. We meet up not too far from the barn. Everyone is worried about me because they can see I'm freaked out and my shirt is missing. I just tell them we need to get the hell out of the woods ASAP. The neighbors and my father are all for it, but his friend and my uncle are wondering what the hell is going on. Well, at least until we heard movement coming behind us fast, and the dogs start going crazy. I look at them and say that they can stay in the woods if they want, but I'm getting out of there, and take off running from the direction they came. And they start following me. The journey back wasn't exactly quiet though. We'd have sticks or rocks thrown at us, and every now and then something would call out from the trees ahead of us, like they were marking our passing. We get back to the neighbour's house. Their grandpa is standing outside with an old shotgun and a spotlight. We get inside and they ask me what happened. I tell them. My uncle and my father's friend laugh until they see the looks on everyone else's face. We stay there for another hour, then pile in my uncle's old Jeep and beeline it for home. I never stayed out in the woods again. Nor did I even go into them for the last year we lived there. Okay, this video's gone far enough, so I am going to stop here for this video. There is a part 2 of the thread, where OP goes on to share even more creepy stories. So stay tuned for the second part of the video. Until then, stay safe and subscribe for more such stories.